Hello, and welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and I'm a congenital amputee of the right hand. In this show, I will interview other amputees and allow them to tell you their incredible life stories. I'll also feature family members of amputees and others who support the amputee community, all in an effort to discuss the challenges and triumphs of those living with limb loss. So stick around and listen to inspirational stories and find out why we say, we're not stumped. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm Mike Boland, and I'm very honored to have four gentlemen on today. One of them I met at the Amputee Coalition event in August, and I was very impressed with the content that you were able to present, and that's Laduan Smedley Jr. And Laduan is president and co-founder of the Limb Care Foundation, as well the O&P Tree Work, and also works full-time at UC Davis. And I'll allow you to introduce everyone, or I think you're going to introduce yourselves. That's taking the time to be on our We're Not Stumped podcast. So thank you, and I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm a certified prosthetist and orthotist. I'm the supervisor for the orthotic and prosthetic section, and like you mentioned, co-founder and president of the Limb Care Foundation. So I'll kick it off to Brandon Edenedo for introduction.
Yeah, my name is Brandon Edenedo. I'm a physical therapist working in outpatient orthopedics mostly down in Southern California in the Los Angeles area. USC graduate, and very excited to be working with this organization and bringing the rehabilitation full circle.
Fantastic.
I'm Aarron Flowers, Vice President. I am a practicing foot and ankle surgeon in Santa Cruz, multi-specialty orthopedic group, and work with amputees on a frequent basis. And so, I think we're doing some good things, and we're excited to be here.
Awesome. And my name is Quincy Amarikwa. I'm a co-founding member of Limb Care Foundation. Traditionally, I'm known for my professional soccer career. I just completed my 13th year in a capacity with the organization. I'm the Chief Creative Opportunities Officer and specialize in a lot of the mental health aspects within the organization, and how we look to expand more in the education of this space, and the importance of getting this information to the people who are in most of need.
Yeah, I read where you had stated something, you recently had a knee injury, and how recent it was, and the mental aspect of your recovery was pretty important. Would you like to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think that was my second, what would be quote unquote, I won't do the air quotes, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier there. Exactly. That was my second career-ending
Wow.
injury, right? My first was breaking my femur when I was 12, which almost really solidified the path of me going into soccer, where at that time it probably would have gone into sprinting. And then the second time, more recently, several years ago, was in San Jose when I was playing for the Earthquakes. And coming back from that, I think what was amazing about just the experience in general, where I met the three amazingly talented individuals I'm here with today, was when we were all studying pre-med at UC Davis together, and really started the early conversations of what Limb Care Foundation ultimately officially established and launched itself as. Very much compliments of the great work of Laduan here in 2020. And I think being able to view the recovery process from the lens of the medical field, and knowing and understanding the heart and humanity that individuals in this field come into work with, while also trying to compartmentalize and fully understand that there's a business aspect of it, which leaves some who are in most of need of these services, resources, and education without. And that's really the space in which Limb Care Foundation has established, a strong and positive and valuable presence for the communities that we serve. So
yeah, definitely a lot of positives there. I read Laduan, you said prosthetics and orthodontics is my career, but helping others is my passion. So if you don't mind talking about some of the inspiration to actually start the organization, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. being in the medical field, we're always taught the importance of just a multidisciplinary team. I'm fortunate enough to work in a hospital where I'm surrounded by, PTs and OTs and just everybody who's involved in the amputee care, and even just for orthotic patients. So having that vision and that experience, I wanted to bring that to a nonprofit organization to where we can offer that same multidisciplinary approach to improving the lives of amputees and people who just have limb difference, limb loss, things like that. And so having also that experience, knowing how expensive some of these items can be for patients. The hardest part of my day is dealing with insurance. So trying to, one, identify the best possible device that I can provide to a patient while also considering their insurance can be a struggle sometimes. So the importance of this organization is to kind of eliminate some of those financial barriers so we can give patients the best outcomes that they can have with their particular device.
That's fantastic. And I read on your website, and by the way, I'll have the links to the website and all of your social profiles on everything that this is going to be posted to. But I did read on your website that you're also helping homeless, if I'm not mistaken. And
yes,
if you don't want to speak about
absolutely.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we definitely understand the importance of preventative care. A lot of amputations, I'm sure Aarron can speak to this as well. It can start off as a simple wound that, if unchecked, can lead to catastrophic events. And it's something that, if we can save someone's limb from being an amputee, experiencing amputation, maybe that person who is homeless or unsheltered can, find a job and get off the streets and get the help that they need when they're able-bodied. Because after an amputation, it's just so much harder to overcome that.
Yeah. Well supported in literature. Over 80% of amputations are typically diabetic related. Diabetic foot wounds, ulcerations, and a lot of that comes from lack of education. Lack of support. Resources. Once patients do find out they have diabetes, end-stage renal disease, a lot of times it's too late. The first time that you're meeting people, it's when, I am performing a amputation, whether it's a toe or a whole foot. A lot of times the first time I'm meeting people is when, something is being taken at that moment. It's sad. I think a lot of times it comes from, events or people that you knew growing up, which lead to why we have the careers that we do. Interesting Laduan story is we actually met back in high school. UC Davis had put on this program. I'm from Southern California. He's from Sacramento. They did this, maybe it was like a week-long program where you would come up to Davis, you shadow for the week, you see kind of what the college itself is like. And at the age of, I think we were like 15, I had no clue what I wanted to do. And Laduan wanted to make limbs. Like at 15 years old, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And so, I think as we grew, it kind of, we were almost kind of forced, to doing, what we're doing now, just because of all of the interest that it piqued. Like I said, you get a very multifaceted approach. You get the therapy aspect of things and the rehab. You get the understanding that comes with that, just as far as getting back to the baseline. You have the athletic, spectrum where you see someone that's gone through trials and tribulations as far as injuries, not just coming back to injuries, but also excelling in the sport that he does. Then you have the, the person that's creating the limbs that help, people who have lost function regain control, and in that state, you're gaining back your independence, and I think that's where there's so many realms of what it means to be an amputee, or what it means, that we put, we put our quotations, but, disabilities, right? You're only as disabled as, the capacity, that you put yourself into. And so a lot of times I feel, having an organization like this where we just help, we get the most random calls sometimes of, things, whether it's a wheelchair, whether it is a prosthetic, whether it's a shoe, there's so many people that need help to, move past that, situation that they had. So, we can see that impact that we're having on individual people. I think our goal would be to have that, just done at a larger scale. If we're helping 10 people, we want to help 1,000 people. If we can help 1,000 people, we want to help 10,000 people, so I think that's really what our objective is.
Well, you certainly are helping a lot of people. And you mentioned wheelchair earlier, and I was reading a really nice story on Facebook about a person named Audrey. And I believe if one of you can speak to that one, because that was a great story. I don't want to give that one away. Was that Laduan? I believe it was where you had seen someone outside a grocery store.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
No, that's fine.
Yes. Yeah. So I was visiting my parents, and we had to run to Bel Air to get some food. And I just so happened to have a walker that was donated to me in my car. And I saw Audrey sitting outside, and I kind of walked up to her, and she had a manual wheelchair and a lot of stuff on it, and it wasn't in the best condition. And I approached her. I was like, could you use a walker? She's like, I can't really use a walker, but I could really use a wheelchair. I was like, okay, I gave her my card. I was like, this is what I do. Like, I told her about myself. I told her about the organization, and she didn't have a consistent form of communication at that time. And so she kind of told me what she wanted in a wheelchair, something that she can get around with. She did mention that she had to have bilateral hip surgery coming up. And so, she wanted to have this chair pretty soon because her mobility was pretty much limited with her current chair. So I went to our storage facility, and I found, the right wheelchair for her weight and size and mobility and everything. And I was able to I would have my parents go and check and say, hey, is this person still there? Because I can't really call her. And so one day she was sitting outside, and that same day I came over there and gave her the wheelchair, and we took a picture, and it was the perfect moment, helping someone with something so simple as a wheelchair that a lot of people would just throw away when it's not being used. The fact that we can take this chair and impact someone else positively was amazing. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, it really illustrates the great work you all do, because you do recycle prosthetics. And I know in watching your presentation at the Amputee Coalition, it may not be something necessarily that happens in the States, but you can help other countries, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that was correct. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we've sent several shipments to Venezuela. We're working on on shipping a bunch of wheelchairs and canes and crutches to another organization in Peru. We're also connected with Pinta, another nonprofit organization based in the East Coast, New York, I believe. And so we're coordinating with them to send a shipment to Mexico as well.
And we also have connections with Vietnam. So pre-COVID, every year I would actually go to Vietnam to do surgical work in Da Nang. So I do about a week out there, and reconstructive surgeries, old traumas that we're more or less managing remotely. And we'll actually go out each year and we'll operate and have an establishment there. But we're also sending to them as well too.
Yeah, and I read it's DMEPOS, if I'm not mistaken. So like I said, I did some research, and it's donate durable medical equipment, prosthetics, or orthotic supplies. Is that correct? Or go ahead.
Durable medical equipment, prosthetic, orthotic supplies.
Fantastic. I mean, that's great what you're doing. I did read about your efforts in Venezuela in 2022, May of 2022, sending over a lot of prosthetics. That was fantastic. So congratulations on that effort. Very well done. Also, too, I think we know how a couple of you met in high school. How did you all four get together? Just out of curiosity. I'd love to hear that.
So, we all met at UC Davis in undergrad. Laduan, myself, and Quincy were all a year ahead of Aarron. Laduan and I were roommates. Aarron, Quincy, and myself all had the same major, and so we were in a lot of classes together. We were just all friends in general. And through talking about future plans and what we wanted to do with our lives, post graduation, myself wanted to go in physical therapy, Laduan into O&P, Aarron into prosthetics, and Quincy playing soccer. We think it'd be great if we can stay in contact professionally after school. So when we're all done getting our degrees and certifications and licenses, maybe even have practices that are next to each other and referring patients and kind of still approaching with that wellness approach of kind of hitting every aspect of the treatment spectrum. as things kind of kept on, as our lives progressed, and the initial plans kind of ended up changing and merging a little bit differently just as life progresses. The initial idea of, oh, we're all going to have our own spots and we just kind of refer back to each other morphed into, since we're all doing our individual thing kind of separately, we can still come together, use our expertise to help people. And that's kind of where the Limb Care Foundation kind of started to take shape as a nonprofit in the model that we currently have right now.
And what year did that start? I apologize. I know I looked, I want to say 2018, but I could be wrong. What year did you start with the Limb Care Foundation?
Yeah, so unofficially 2018.
Okay.
But we did all the paperwork in 2019, and then COVID hit and everything was delayed.
Yeah.
So officially 2020.
Boy, I tell you, you've done a lot then in a very short amount of time, especially because of COVID. I mean, that put a wrench in a lot of things, obviously. Yeah. So in your careers, and when you see certainly a lot more people than I do as far as amputees and things like that, but I do get an opportunity now to talk a little bit more to them, and I get their perspective. But from your perspective, what are some of the things that they need to think about as they progress in their recovery and the challenges they may face? Is there anything that you see a commonality? I know we talked about mentally, that's a big part, but I'll just open it up to any of you that can think of something that
I think having a good support system, whether it's family, friends, immediate loved ones, so if there are any support groups in your community, I think that would be like the first place to start. I think anywhere where you can obtain information on, basically like if there's devices that are available, if there are, meetings that you can attend with groups of people, or even events. I think one aspect of our organization as well too is putting on events. One thing that we're striving to achieve is to put on a soccer event for children. And so I think it's just even starting at multiple levels, right? One thing that I deal with, which is different than amputees, are congenital deformities sometimes. So like clubfoot, and so like I'll have pediatric patients who come in with club feet. They start bracing from a very young age, and then they have someone like me who follows them continually through life. And it's important for them to play and have fun, and then kind of enjoy, the normal things about being a kid, So I think that is important as well too. So that's where I would start.
Yeah. And we kind of cover the whole spectrum, because you start with the surgery and then you could transition to the therapy side and just the importance of that. I don't know if you want to add anything as far as.
Yeah, so kind of looking at it, kind of like Laduan saying, kind of the top-down experience. So obviously starting with prevention, that's kind of where I would come in as well too, because I have patients that either have diabetes or other like peripheral neuropathies where they are vulnerable and susceptible to developing these wounds that they can't feel progressing and getting worse. And so I've had some patients where I'm treating their ankle and I know that they have diabetic neuropathy, and I look down and I kind of see like, oh, you have this mark on your foot that's been there the last couple of times I've seen them. And so just education on that to ensure that it doesn't turn into something that could be more serious and life-threatening. But then even going back into the other side of things, where I do have a patient that did experience an amputation and is now either trying to get back to a higher level of function with their new prosthetic, or being able just to address pain from the procedure. All that kind of stuff comes back around in terms of the PT regard. So there's a lot of different things that kind of go into the full recovery and treatment when someone does experience an amputation that is beyond just getting the correct device fitted in the aftermath. There's a lot of things on either end of that I think the general public and even some amputee patients aren't really aware of. And that's where we're trying to come in to fill in those gaps.
I think a big aspect is knowledge and education, right? We strive to be experts in our respective fields, right? And I think ultimately what I've seen is a lot of things happen because of lack of education, right? Whether it is something diabetic related or whether it is something like a post-operative protocol. You know, a lot of times you will come out of a situation, you'll go, okay, well, can I walk on this? How can I use this? You know, is it too much if I'm doing this? You know, and so I think a lot of times if you have a safe space where you can go to collectively to ask these questions, you know, I think that's the first start to your recovery. You know, like I said, and it's not always just amputees. You know, there's people who get in car accidents or have falls and break their ankle, and, you know, and so you may be incapacitated for a short period of time, you know, but you still need those resources just as far as to get you back on your feet, I guess, quote unquote, for me, feet. But you know, there's other body parts as well.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the knowledge. And as I talk to other amputees on this program, one thing that I've realized, and I've gotten feedback from people that are listening, that some of these people are at the very beginning stages of their own journey. And one of the things I've learned, I shouldn't say I've learned, I knew from having my own prosthetics, and I'm sure in being professionals, you all know, that the prosthetic, the whole journey of that is a journey in of itself. It's not like, hey, I have a amputation and then tomorrow I get a prosthetic. There is a journey there. And from your perspective, I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah. That is a common perception. And it's, you know, if not the first question I get after an amputation when I'm talking to someone in the hospital, it's you know, the top 5 question is, when can I get my device? And right after an amputation, you know, you're dealing with a lot of swelling, a lot of, you know, your body has lost a limb. There could be phantom limb sensation, phantom limb pain. You're going to have muscle atrophy. So your whole body is going through a significant change. And Quincy could even touch upon the mental aspect too, of just, you know, everything that happens. But the process, depending on, you know, the patient's ability to heal and other things, it could be,
there's a lot of,
you know, 4 to 6 months before someone is back on like a preparatory type device. And it could be a year plus before they have a more definitive prosthetic device. And that is kind of industry standard. There's often a phase where a patient has what we call a check socket, which is like a clear plastic, like a socket device that goes over their limb. It's custom fit. And that way it's kind of a temporary, so it's not meant for long-term use, but it's clear because we can see inside the limb if there's any pressure points or places that need adjustments, and we can accommodate for volume changes in that system. And so typically we'll have a patient wear that for, you know, a week or two and kind of reevaluate and see if another one needs to be made before we can even get to that definitive prosthetic phase. So yeah, it is a lengthy process. And it's kind of difficult for some patients to have a limb and then, you know, especially in traumatic cases,
Sure.
And then to be kind of bed bound or chair bound for a while until they wait for a device. And that's kind of where the importance of therapy and, you know, stretching and exercising and just, you know, if you don't use it, you lose it. So still keeping those other muscles nice and strong will result in the best outcome.
And I would imagine too, at that point, maybe the mental part is extremely important as well, I would think. Is that correct?
Yeah. So even just reflecting on this conversation in the moment is a very empowering and inspiring education process for myself as well. When I reflect back on what has now been a 13-year professional career, to make it to 10 plus years in any field of any professional field requires that you have a fundamental expertise or understanding of your environment. And from a humanitarian perspective, we're all on Team Human, right? And we are all directly invested in personal survival and the survival of our communities. And each of us are able-bodied to a certain degree, just as we are all educated to a certain degree. But what is common between all of us is our mind, because that's where we spend the most of our time collectively as an individual and person. And if time is what we look to being the most valuable asset for which we all have, because we're all equal as it relates to time, because we all have the equal amount of time per day. What we might not all have is an equal amount of time to invest in the processes that will yield us the greatest opportunities in the future. And when we can package that idea into the mind, if we view the mind as a body that has limbs, and there's certain aspects of our minds that are without certain limbs, we can now identify early on in the process the same way in which these experts can see a dot on your leg and know and see in their mind, 2 years from now, you'll be in a room, unfortunately, meeting an expert like this who's going to be removing your limb permanently. And it is in your system as a body's best interest that that is removed at that point, because unfortunately, the information you were needing 2 years previously was not readily available to you. And that could be a lack of communication system to get that information in a timely manner, location of where someone is at in a particular point in time. But the beauty of platforms and opportunities like this to connect on a much more condensed time frame, the way I view it, to compartmentalize it, the same way in which we compartmentalize the body to approach it in a multidisciplinary approach, is pre-pandemic world and post-pandemic world. For as difficult of an experience and the trials and tribulations that each of us individually had to go through mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally during the pandemic, the positive future vision that we can realize as a result of that collective humanitarian difficult time is one of a future that is better than our past, because we value the experiences we collected during that time. That's what earned us the professional title, experience, license, expertise that each of us individually has. And I know each member could speak to their own particular trials and tribulations of getting to their levels of certification in their particular fields. The same way in which I'm very certain that individuals who are amputees can not only express those difficulties and those moments, but they can also speak to them being here today and present, and that life is a precious gift. And the opportunity to share these stories are ones that will inspire and inspire the next generation, and make it help individuals know that they aren't alone in this process.
Boy, you used the team human.
Yeah, that was perfect.
That was great. Yeah, please, if someone wants to jump in, I'd love what you had to say.
I think going on what Quincy was saying as well too is education has become easier to obtain, right? Historically, you wanted to find something out, you go to the library to read a book, right? Now everything is published online, and so now we have an opportunity to have podcasts and discussions like this where we can go over this material and summarize key point facts, and people can obtain knowledge readily available from their phones, and so that's something where I think we do have an advantage now, where we can educate people on a broader spectrum, from every degree, like literally, are you an amputee? Did you just have an injury? Is it sports related? We kind of can cover all of those bases. And so I think that's something that, that's what our organization is trying to do. We're saying, look, if you need help, we are Team Human. I'm going to steal that. Like,
I love that.
We're here to help you however you need, whether it's a wheelchair, whether it's a shoe, whether it's a limb, whether it's someone to talk to. I think a lot of times we get calls, and advice. Hey, like I'm having this procedure, what advice can you give? And now you have 4 people that could give different perspectives as far as what you do from that standpoint. So I think that is, crucial, to healing, whether, and that's such a broadly, used term as healing, right? But we're all healing, whether it's mental health, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional support, but I think you have to cover all three, spiritual growth and wealth, so I think there's a lot of aspects of that we're all trying to make ourselves a little bit better every day. And I think we wake up every morning, this gives us a purpose, and so I think sometimes that gives you that additional drive as well too.
Yeah, you said drive. That's what I was thinking as you were speaking, because all four of you have the drive to help people, and we all know people that may be doing X, Y, or Z, but then just the care, though, the personal care that you have for others is something that is just at another level. I mean, I'm inspired listening to you four, and I just can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on this podcast. I'm not saying that we have to end right now. this is just fantastic. Even though, just so the audience knows, we're actually recording this on a Sunday during football, so they're very kind of you to take the time to do that. But we talked about Audrey earlier.
Which football?
That's the real one. That's true. Yes, American football. Good point. My bad. But we had talked about Audrey earlier. Is there, off the top of your head, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but because I'm sure there's other success stories. What you did in Venezuela, is a success story. Obviously, is there anything else that comes to mind as you think about what you've been able to do?
I had a lady, field worker. So she, field worker, non-documented. She stepped on a nail maybe 6 months ago before she saw me. She'd been managing it on her own. She's diabetes, neuropathy, so it doesn't hurt. But relatively large wound that would get infected. She would go to emergency room to give her antibiotics. She didn't have insurance. I took the case on as like a pro bono case, so didn't get paid anything for it. This is just something that the organization I work through, we have occasional times where we could do this. Did a definitive amputation of her foot. So basically took a transmetatarsal amputation, and everything healed, but she needed a shoe, to go back to and work, and nothing was covered. She couldn't get any coverage for shoes. And so through the organization, I was able to obtain a custom pair of shoes, got it fitted, and she was grateful. She couldn't pay for it. She gave me a flag of her saint that she prayed to, every day, like during recovery. And, so she gave me that, and I keep it in my car, so it's just one of those things where, now I'm sitting like on the backseat of my car, and that's my reminder that, we help this person, everything. I see her once a year, and it's been 3 years, since she had her procedure. She's back to work. She's happy. And every time I see her, she says I saved her, and so for me, if you're having that hard day and this patient's coming in the room and she's smiling when she doesn't speak English at all, but every time she sees me, she tells her friends and family. She drops tamales off during Christmas. Nice. Those are the moments that matter.
That's a fantastic story. Any others? I'll open it up.
Yeah, I will say we haven't quite been able to deliver yet, but we're working with two people who've reached out to us who are actually in Egypt, and they're both, or one's an upper extremity amputee above the elbow, and the other one is below the knee, looking for a foot, and for the above elbow amputee, trying to find a device that can be programmed within another country. So we're looking at a myoelectric device. And so we don't currently have one that has been donated to us. So we're actively seeking for one. But the programming from, particular companies, the prosthetists in Egypt would have to be trained on the software to be able to do the programming and the pattern recognition and all that stuff. So we're still kind of working that out. So I just wanted to put that out there as a plug. If anybody sees this, if they would like to donate, an upper extremity left hand device, that we are actively seeking one.
You think of the impact that would hold, you know what I mean? So, not individually on that one person, but then through educating that prosthetist in Egypt, now that could be 100 people that, he is now educated on and helping and influencing moving forward. So, yeah, it's those I don't know. It's the small little things that have major impact.
Little butterfly effects.
And then the organization in Mexico, I was just on a conference call with them the other day, and they're really in need. It's not even like a device, but they're really in need of a frame that they can use to heat up the plastic, like a smaller one. So when they're working with, above amputees or pediatric patients, that, having a smaller frame could impact, hundreds of thousands. I mean, you could use this frame so many times, and they don't even have that, the frame for the oven to do that. So that, they have to do a workaround, and the frame is, relatively inexpensive. So, something that we'll provide to them as an organization that will impact who knows how many people's lives.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And, you put that plug in, and I think that's great. I'm glad you did that. But to get to your site, it's limbcarefoundation.org. Is that correct?
Yes.
Just in case people are listening and they don't have access to being able to see the links where they're going to live. And also, I mentioned O&P Tree. I'd like to learn a little bit more about that and how that's working out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So O&P Tree is a mobile app that was designed for patients and clinicians to be able to look up the specific DME POS. So durable medical equipment, prosthetic orthotic supplies. So the codes are either L codes or A codes. They're listed as HICS codes. So it's don't ask me what the acronym is, but there are hundreds, thousands of codes that prosthetists and clinicians use to actually submit a bill for a patient for a prosthetic device. So if something is billed incorrectly, or if there's missing charges or anything, it could cause red flags and lead to denials and things like that. I also wanted to make a system for patients to be informed as far as what they are being charged for exactly. So if you go to a clinician's office and you have a breakdown of all these codes and you're like, I have no idea what this means, you can go to the app and see exactly what you received. We're currently going through an update on the app, so it's not on the App Store right now, but we are in the process of doing an update. So we'll probably have that out in the next year or so.
Boy, I could see a lot of uses for that. That's a great idea, especially the breakdown of the costs. It seems like as I talk to people, that's another one that it gets a little bit confusing and muddy.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. And insurance coverage for certain devices, especially the DMEs, it's kind of up in the air depending on what insurance you have. Some stuff is fully covered, some stuff isn't covered at all. A lot of the resources are, you get a brand new scooter and you use the scooter for 6 weeks and then, it's sitting in your garage, and so on one end, we're removing, quote unquote, a resource, that could be used for someone else that could be provided for free. And also we're helping, take some space out of your garage for your motorcycle,
Like I've had a few patients that were coming off of knee surgeries and they had elaborate braces and like nice crutches, and just talking to them and they're like, oh, I'm working with them, they're progressing beyond that point where they need them. It's like, well, I just have this stuff now. I'm like, oh, actually I have this organization that we can take that off your hands. And I've actually been able to collect these items that I know are still in really good condition because they were brand new, used for a couple of weeks, and been able to kind of clean and distribute to other patients that I've had that didn't have those same materials for whatever reason.
And these are thousands of dollars worth of, equipment that people are sometimes throwing away.
Yeah, just because, again, they don't have any use for it anymore, and they're still, safe and good to use. It's just a matter of getting them to the people that would still need them.
So if there's someone listening that has some of this equipment and they want to get it to you, that's all available on your website. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic because it kind of brings back me. I remember breaking a foot when I was younger, and what do we do with the crutches now?
Exactly.
To be able to have an organization. Again, you're talking about the technology that brings us together. This is such a great thing. And again, limbcarefoundation.org if the listeners have something like that or need something like this, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. It's fantastic. And I've taken a lot of your time, but I do want to ask one other question before I let you get back to your American football, if you will. I saw a great post. The Limb Care Foundation had the honor of participating in the Black Players for Change and the Black Women's Player Collective, the first annual Juneteenth celebration. That was fantastic. Can you tell me, the audience, a little bit about that?
Well, Yeah, I'm just thinking that's an update. That's an update to me, which is some impactful work that we've been doing through the BPC organization. So, we've discussed a lot about Limb Care Foundation and how we've come together and the work that we've been doing for many, many years before things were officially established. Similar in my professional, capacity as a player who spent the entirety of my career here in America, there's some unfortunate realities that come along in the professional sports realm that I think has become a lot more common, a lot more.
You see it now.
Yeah, it's much more.
It's been
It's
around.
out in the open now. Let's say.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be a better way of, yes, and I appreciate that. It's something that similar to a lot of the things that we've discussed on being a need in the marketplace and caring, right? Limb Care Foundation. There's been so much care put into this, but many of these systems obviously are for-profit systems. Much of the work we're doing is a nonprofit space, right? There's a level of care that isn't necessarily vertically integrated into the for-profit system yet. And I believe that hopefully bridges the gap as to what it is we're fundamentally doing. Through the work of BPC, which is a nonprofit organization of over 170 plus, player, staff, and coach from MLS that came together in 2020. I happen to be the founder of that organization, and
Nice.
a lot of the work that we've been doing as a result of that has been bridging the gap of the lack of education in many capacities and resources that will further vertically integrate into bringing care into the for-profit space with the right intentions. So I think much an individual's first engagement with something is just with the front-facing brand of what it is. So for instance, even just from this conversation here, like I said, is very inspiring and educational conversation is, here's in the minds of the individual who's not in the greatest situation or circumstance in life is a young man showing up saying, I'm here to help you with a gift that is of substantial value, not only monetarily, but also spiritually, emotionally. It's almost beyond belief. And that is an experience that is difficult for people to compartmentalize, rationalize, and believe to be true. And it's an unfortunate truth of the experience of humanity. The fact that we can get to places where we are all in the same space, but we might be in different worlds mentally based on past traumas and history. Not all amputations can be seen physically on the body, right? And that kind of hopefully ties back into the system of what our brain is and what our thought is and how we think and perceive ourselves internally manifests itself in how we act and conduct ourselves in the world. And we all need to explore and be able to make mistakes and test and learn to understand not only who we are, but how we can be of best service and care to the people around us. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that question. And, it's a learning process for me here. A lot of this is happening in real time. And to the best of my ability, I've tried to accurately articulate in real time my personal experiences and emotions and feelings in a manner that can be received positively from the perspectives of those who are interacting with me, maybe for the first time, or re-interacting with me based on who I am today relative to who we were when we all first came together with this back in college, right? And I think that's where we can all relate to each other when being on Team Human. We are all in this together, whether you like that or not, whether you like it or not, right? Whether it's American football or world football, or how I call it soccer, right? Calling it soccer growing up through this system wasn't received too positively from those who saw it as football, right? And then in the American culture, hey, football is American football, right? But I appreciate you and even the, you know, the necessity, in my opinion, personal opinion, for humor and comedy to be able to exist, because that's what humanizes us in this process. And we need to be able to joke, you know, and mess around and play, because we're all children at heart. And this ties very much into what Aarron had said earlier on about the play aspect of that. And that ties into the Juneteenth announcement. So I'm trying to gather my thoughts, because that was a big question for me to reflect on. So I appreciate this. So
I think what he's saying as well as too is it's you know, the goal is to break down barriers, right? You know, there's stereotypes that are in place when you think of an athlete. There's stereotypes that are in place when you think of race, you know, just as far as when you see me walking up the street, you make assumptions, and this is what we all do, right? You wouldn't know what I do for a career or profession or passions or things that I have, but by doing podcasts and things like this, you know, we're creating exposure, right? You're motivating youth. You know, if there's a younger child that is an amputee and they go, hey, these guys are cool, you know, something as, you know, baseline simple as that, right? Or a parent who goes, I want my child to go into medicine or physical therapy or prosthetics, or I have a child who's interested in sports and they had an injury at a young age, you know, so just being in a space where you can physically see someone that looks like you doing positive things, you know, I think that is the overall goal. You know, you're changing the face of what it feels, you know, what it means to be an athlete. You're changing the face of what it means to be a physician, what it means to be a doctor, what it means to be a professional, you know. So I think, you know, ultimately that's one advantage of you know, doing things like this. You know, we're collaborating. There will be someone that sees this and A, either reaches out, B, is motivated to go down their own path as far as helping other people, you know. So I think it does give that butterfly effect, or a tree, you know, effect, where here's a branch, we're kind of stemming off from there as well too. You know, so I think it's cool that we are getting more opportunities to collaborate with other collectives, you know, who are like-minded and want to help, you know, other people in that same avenue. And then in the same boat, it's giving us the opportunity to even make changes to what our original goals were. You know, like if everything just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which is inspiring. You know, like we'll receive some information from a certain patient for something that they need, and you know, it's like mind blowing. Like, oh wow, like I had no clue that you were dealing with this, or that this was something that was, you know, that could impact you this much. You know, so I'm excited to see where we go. You know what I mean? Just as far as other collaborations and with the Black, you know, Players for Change, just because that opens up a lot of other opportunities as well too.
And you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger because of the four people sitting here. The fact that you care so much, you're dedicated, you're educated, you're smart, and this was such a well-rounded conversation. I think that we probably could do another podcast and talk a little bit more. But again, I've taken so much of your time. I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today and be on the We're Not Stumped podcast. It meant so much. It meant a lot for me to meet you at the Amputee Coalition event earlier this year. And this was a fantastic conversation. So thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your insights.
Thank you for having us, man. Yeah, absolutely.
Stumped podcast, hosted by Mike Boland. If you want to be a guest on the program, reach out to Mike at his email address, mike@mikeboland.com. This podcast is produced by One Hand Man Productions. If you are looking to start your podcast, go to onehandmanproductions.com.